Welcome into the Atlanta football party. I'm Jarvis Davis. Coming up on today's show, I think we've been lied to.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere else but right here on Locked On. I am your host, Tenitra Batiste, and alongside me are Tori, McElhaney, Aaron Freeman, and Jarvis Davis. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase Locked On NFL for a first deposit match up to $100. The Atlanta Football Party is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So guys, the Falcons lost 29-25 to the Bucs Sunday, lost sole possession of first place in the NFC South too. And of course, we're going to deep dive into the deets of this game and talk about what's next for the Falcons as they figure out how to move forward when they don't necessarily have all the control of their own playoff destiny anymore. But before we do that, let's talk top 3 takeaways. Tori, we'll start with you because you had an interesting article that you wrote as a part of Tori's notebook. And you basically said, hey, kind of where I thought they were going to be is not kind of where they are, but essentially we're here now.
Yeah, I was going back through and kind of thinking back to where my headspace was about this team in training camp. Like that was kind of the basis for that article. It's like, where did I think that the team would be at this point in the season back then? And I actually went back in an old notebook and kind of looked at it, and I had this team winning 11 games. Is what going into the season, I had them winning 11 games. I had them at the top of the NFC South. And here we are now with 4 weeks left in the season, and that's not the team that I thought they would be. This isn't the team that I thought that would be. This isn't a Falcons team that I was expecting to have as many losses as they've had, but also kind of just looking at the NFC South, and they never broke away from the pack. And that was something that they could have done on Sunday with a win against Tampa Bay. It's something that they needed to do if they wanted to find separation in a division that, let's be honest, is kind of the butt of every joke around the league. The way that you can kind of garner some respect across the league, it's like, yeah, our division's bad, but look, we beat everybody in the division. So you got to give us a little bit of respect there. But that's not what happened on Sunday. And so it's kind of me coming to terms with the fact that this team isn't what I thought it was going to be. And so what do we have now? You have 4 games left. In order for them to get to double-digit wins, they got to win out. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. It's probably a little improbable, though. So it's just kind of weighing, like, how much can you value the individual progress that maybe some key individuals on this team have made versus the overall implications of a loss like Sunday having an effect on the long-term standings in the division. So all of those things are kind of just racking around in my brain after the loss yesterday.
Yeah, and I think a couple great points that you make there. First and foremost, like you, I kind of hovered between 10 and 11 at the beginning, but I went optimistic and I erred on the side of 11 because I saw a pathway to 11 wins this season based on the roster.
Talent.
I saw the talent and I said it's there. But I want to go with something else that you mentioned, which was, there are some individuals who I can say, hey, I thought they were going to be there and they're there. Like I'm excited by what we're seeing in Bijan Robinson. I think that's a good look. I think that seeing some growth and evolution, I'd say, and when I say early on, just meaning, Matthew Bijan is a rookie. And I think we can all agree each week he takes a step. So there are individuals that I've seen that I expected to be here at this point of the season, but the team collectively, I'm with you. And then to your point, when I look at the schedule and I'm like, okay, no, I don't really see my path to 10. Even that might be even a daunting task because Panthers, Colts, Bears, Saints. And I literally was thinking to myself, I'm going to be home for Christmas. I might have to take a turnaround trip or just stay myself at home because I believe that January 7th game is going to be the all-encompassing, all-deciding game for this particular division. So, and Aaron, you kind of had a piggyback and a cosign on what Tori was saying, which is like, okay, you're looking to and you're thinking, all right, by this time we're going to be there. We're going to be there. We're going to be there. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We're not there yet.
Yeah, basically, I'll echo a lot of the sentiments that Tori had. I think I had this team winning 10 games this year. So it's still possible, but, it's going to be tough for them at this point. And all year long, for me, a lot of it was, okay, it's not really how you start, it's how you finish. And I thought at this point, all the ups and downs, the roller coaster, whatever you want to call it, that the Falcons went through over the first 10 games of the season would suddenly start to sort of pay off for this team down this stretch. And you would see a much better version of this team. And while you've seen, promising signs from this team, they just couldn't put it all together on Sunday against the Bucs. And, I think a lot of it, they kind of put it on Desmond Ridder to kind of be the engine of the offense in the passing game. And while I don't think Ridder played poorly, he just didn't make enough of the plays that he needed to win the game. And it was too little too late. It's been kind of the story of the season where those first three quarters is a lot of just like, we're just waiting around for this offense to kick in. And then in the fourth quarter, it does. And you're like, okay, like, can we get the fourth quarter version of the Falcons at some point in the first three quarters? And we continue to be talking about that. So I feel like this team has underachieved in a lot of ways. I was talking to some of my listeners, the Locked On Falcons Discord over the weekend, and someone asked me a question in terms of what areas of this team have, exceeded your expectations and what areas of this team have not quite lived up to your expectations. And to be honest with you, I couldn't think of a single instance where something has really exceeded my expectations. It's just been a lot of like this thing that I thought going into the season that would be competent to good has been below average or something along those lines. And so
that's a good point.
Feels like across the board, like, whether it's the run game or the offensive line or the pass rush or, some of these other areas, the quarterback play, some of the weapons, like it just feels like you've gotten positives from all of those areas, but it just hasn't been as consistent as you wanted. And so overall, you just kind of look at this point and say, yeah, it was a lot of underachieving from the Falcons this year, given the expectations that we all had going into this season.
Well, Free, you must be in my head because that's the word that was coming to mind. Every person that I thought of, the minute you said exceeded expectations, I started saying, well, is there anyone? And I said, yeah, in spades. So there might be 3-4 games, Jesse Bates III, where he exceeded expectations, but he came back to the median because there were 3 more games where it was just kind of pedestrian. And then he went back to being that Jesse Bates that became this 2-time NFC Defensive Player of the Week. So it's that inconsistency, even with the guy that you might say is the one who has gotten close to exceeding on a consistent basis, because you just have, like the rest of the team, those pockets of inconsistency that you just can't overlook no matter who you're talking about. And I think that the other piece there is this kind of, when you look at it, it's frustrating because when you see those moments of greatness, I don't care which player it is, or even those moments of solid, right? For those players who all you needed them to do was just be solid, and then solid turned into subpar. That's where that area of frustration goes back to what Tori was saying of, well, yep, coming into the season, this is what I thought, but here's kind of where we are, and this is not where I thought we were going to be. But I know too, Jarvis, one of the things we talked about at the end of our postcast yesterday was, hey, we will legitimately take our 24 hours and we're going to take a pause, kind of step back and see what this thing is. And let's see where we stand now. And yesterday when we talked about it, you were saying, hey, look, just Arthur can't get right. And I said, okay, where are you today? And you said today, you didn't mind triggering your host, but you said today you just want to be single and not married.
I don't want to get married. Here's the thing, right? Because you go back to those first 4 games. When I'm talking about Desmond Ridder, I don't want to get married long term. I'm a red flag type of guy. If you show me some red flags, I am going to not, I'm going to pay attention to those. And I'm not going to ignore them, and try to find all the good positives. Oh, my God, she bringing me flowers and stuff. She brought me flowers this time. Oh, man, that's so cool. Oh, my God. But, she ignores, everything else that's going on, within a relationship. So, and I bring that up because I started looking at some numbers. I was like, all right, everybody always talked about how in those first 4 games they started in 2022. Oh, he didn't throw any interceptions. But look at the other stat. He fumbled the ball in every game except for his first start against New Orleans. And then whether or not it's a fumble or interception, whether they recovered it or not, the only game that he hasn't had a interception or a fumble is 2 games this year. 2 games. And 1 in 2022. So we're talking about 3 games where he's absolutely clean, like literally clean slate, not fumble the ball or he was able to jump on it. I'm talking about like no interceptions, no fumbles. 3 games in his entire career. I'm not going to ignore that anymore. Like, I'm tired of that because that's quarterback 101. Take care of the football. Whether you got to be conservative in your first few games to figure it out and understand how to be able to throw the football and get rid of it. And from a mental standpoint, yeah, you do that. But when it comes to Desmond Ridder, there's just something that's just quite not right. And I said Arthur Smith can't get right when it comes to certain situations and calling plays. Desmond Ridder I feel like this is who he is. I'm not going to ignore that anymore. I feel like this is who he is. He just can't get right when it comes to taking care of the football. And when you have 3 games, we what 16 games in? Like we can't ignore that, folks. And I'm jumping off that bandwagon. I can't get married. I'm gonna stay single. You know, I'm start going back to the clubs and start get my juke on.
Jarvis is going to be in a situationship with Des Ridder until further notice. But listen, we're going to talk more about that and maybe some of the other things that admittedly and rightfully so have just been a source of continuing frustration and kind of where we stand. But before we go there, we're going to talk a little bit about DoorDash. So listen, I told you guys yesterday, right, that DoorDash might be your friend because, hey, maybe you might need some comfort food as you deal with the loss of the Falcons to the Bucs. It's about 24 hours later, you might still need your comfort food. So if you do, DoorDash might be the way for you to go. Now, for DoorDash, you can get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app, of course, and then enter code LOCKED23. Now, you can order whatever it is that you want. I mean, what's your comfort food? Is it wings? I mean, we are here in the ATL, so it might be that. Pizza, soda, burgers, whatever it is that you want, DoorDash can get it delivered to you without missing a beat. So again, pretty simple. All you have to do is to get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. You just download the DoorDash app, enter code LOCKED23, LOCKED23. Now, that's subject to change. Terms do apply, but ultimately speaking, I'm giving you a hug by telling you to check out the DoorDash app, download it, get yourself a great meal, and feel better about yourself and the Falcons' fate. All right, guys. So now let's do a little bit of just more deep dive, because we know that it's not as simple as one player made the wrong decision or coach made the wrong call. There were so many miscues yesterday that there was enough blame to go around for the Falcons as to why they lost that game. So, Aaron, the Falcons entered the fourth quarter down 9 points. They pulled to within 2, and the Bucs went pound town on them. You know, they just ground game. It looked like it was over, but hey, we know what happened. Mike Evans out of bounds on the touchdown. Falcons hold the Bucs to 3. Falcons get a touchdown, and then we also know how it ended. Was this for you the most frustrating Falcons loss of the season? And if so, tell me why. Or if it's not, that's fair enough. But tell me which one was most frustrating.
Well, I'll say the angriest I was after a Falcons game was the London game against the Jaguars. That one caused me to pull my hair out. This game, I think, is up there in the sense of it was frustrating because of what we've just talked about with the expectations were much higher for me at this point in the season, that the fact that they, you know, as we've said, they couldn't get right and they couldn't take advantage of the opportunities that were presented to them, you know, feels more frustrating now today, because you felt like, okay, they had worked through some of those issues. And at that point earlier in the season, in that week 4 game against the Jaguars, they were still figuring stuff out. So I think this game definitely is probably top 2 or 3 in terms of frustration level. But I was so angry after that Jaguars game that I don't know if any game is going to get me to that level this year.
How about you, Jarvis? Was this the game for you, or was there another one that maybe frustrated you a bit more?
that first Tampa game I was pretty up there because this is like I talked about earlier. Like it's hard. You can't get past this, right? Like this is not something that he can work on, or maybe if he just take this extra step, or if he on his 5-step drop, maybe if he just kind of shortened a little bit, maybe it's a 4.5 step. This is not like we're not talking about technical stuff, right? Because this is if he gets to his 1 to his 2 read faster, or hey, maybe if he just hands it off with a better angle when he turns around, or if it's play action, if he just stick that ball in his stomach a little bit longer. We're not talking about technical stuff. We're talking about mental stuff, making sure your head is right. If D Alford comes has a really good punt return, put you in a good position to get some points before the half, like Tori talked about that 8, right? Like being able to convert in those in that time frame is huge when you're talking about going into the locker room, because hey, the conversation is different, right? You missed that field goal and you get that fumble. Now you're behind the sticks. Now you're trying to call plays on 2nd and 14 versus 2nd and 5. Like those are two totally different scenarios as a play caller. So it just really utterly makes me so upset because when people we talking about mental stuff, like I can't even evaluate or look at you and say, hey, I feel like you could be the face of the franchise if we're dealing with all this mental crap. Like this is mental stuff, like mental lapses, not holding on, staying up on riding the center behind so you won't fumble on the goal line. So I guess to answer your question, no. The first Tampa game, like, see how I'm getting angry and more angry I talk? I'm about to shut it down because I'm getting angry and the more I speak. But yeah, I think this is the second most frustrating game. But that first one, it has to be that Tampa game because that was just, we just having too many conversations about quarterback one-on-one stuff. And we're talking about an NFL football game.
Indeed. Tori, save him. What's your area?
So I think,
Tori.
I think an emotion worse than frustrated is numbness, is the feeling of being numb. And I felt that after the loss to the Cardinals, that going into the bye week, like that was being on that like skid of loss after loss after loss. And then it kind of ending when they lost to a 1-8 Cardinals team in Arizona before the bye week. I remember just kind of feeling like this is who this team is. And I don't know how much better it's going to get. And that may be harsh because they did come out after the bye week and they beat the Saints and they did beat the Jets. But they, again, kind of revert back. And here we are talking about a Tampa loss that they should have won. And even down as many linemen as they were, this is a team that outgained Tampa Bay by over 140 rushing, or not rushing, just total yards. Like that's kind of crazy. So I think for me, it was like this loss wasn't as frustrating to me just because I already feel like in that slide from losing to the Cardinals and to the Titans and the Commanders and the Vikings, like that point in time, I've been so numb since that I think my frustration levels have kind of just like leveled out. Just to kind of be like, well, this is what it is.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that because that's exactly what I shared with one of my colleagues here at the radio station today when she was asking about, just how the temperament was in the stadium yesterday. And I said, I think the third quarter was probably the most telling because I'd stepped away from the press box to say hello to a friend. And they were in a 100 section where you had a lot of season ticket holders. And the level of frustration that quickly went to a level of numbness, like I can't even explain it. And it was like, because, that was a grind of a third quarter. I think that might have been 11 game minutes that, the Buccaneers had the ball. And it was like, it just minute by minute, it sucked the life out of them. And then as I was walking back to the press box, Tori, that was also telling because fans weren't saying anything. They were just leaving. It was still the third quarter. There were still 5 minutes left in that quarter. And fans had already left. And I was like, wow, that was so telling. So I told her, I said, you may have seen on TV that there were fans screaming and yelling in frustration. I said, but all I saw was numbness. All I saw was people tapped out. And to me, that was a scarier emotion to see than maybe frustration, because frustration at least tells me you're still tapped in. Anger tells me you're still tapped in. Numbness, that's like when baby girl puts you on the shelf and you're in the friend zone, you ain't coming back out of the friend zone. That's kind of what that felt like.
All these relationship metaphors, we are just
right.
all
I know,
on
like
them,
it's a relationship podcast. Let's talk about relationships in the last segment. Let's have some fun with it.
We stay on the psychiatrist couch on this darn football party. So, but listen, I want to ask too, Jarvis, before we wrap up, and I want to get you guys' takes as well, because this is a personal moment for me yesterday before I kind of numbed out and tapped out like so many others in that stadium. But the Falcons were down 2 starting tackles, to give them credit, and a starting center at one point in the game. Heck, at one point in the game, it was Matthew Bergeron as their only starter on that O-line. So understandably, it wasn't exactly, the team that we're accustomed to seeing when you're saying, oh my God, Chris Lindstrom's gone down, Jake Matthews has gone down, and you already had Kaleb McGary and Drew Dalman out. So I preface by saying I definitely understand that, but I wonder, Jarvis, if somehow maybe that kind of informed Arthur Smith and made him say, hey, I feel like maybe I should lean more in the direction of, 40 passes in the game, and then one of the 3 and outs even go, pass, and then just go 26 with the carries for the day, because maybe he felt like with the O-line being one of the main reasons that they're so successful on the ground, the Falcons are, that they didn't quite have what they wanted. I don't know. Was it that, or is Arthur Smith overthinking this thing?
For me, it has to be overthinking, right? Because it's like there were times where I couldn't even tell the difference between Storm Norton and Kaleb McGary. Just looking at it, there were some times where he had some really good blocks in the run game. So I'm just like, okay, what are we talking about? Like, we don't trust the guys that you entrusted to be able to protect them from a pass standpoint, because at the end of the day, like, a lot more worse stuff can happen when you're passing the football than when you're running the football. Like the amount of room for error opens up tremendously when you throw the football. I see 40 attempts by Desmond Ridder and an interception. So all of those, and then one that was negated by a penalty. So it's just so many things that can happen when you start throwing the football like that, especially when you got a quarterback that we don't quite know where he is. I know where I am with it, but like overall, you got to see what he is as far as these last 4 games. I just really feel like this is a scenario where Arthur Smith kind of has to fall back to the means, because the means is running the football. I don't care who's at the offensive line. And we talked about there was only one starter in there. And, granted, they did have – Tyler Rabel did have his moments. But I think overall, given the situation, he played solid. So you got to – this is all about identity. Like, you run the ball. You got this head coaching gig because you came up with a hell of a run game with Derrick Henry at the helm, and turned around, handing that football to Derrick Henry. And you bringing that to here. And you try to bring that here from a personnel standpoint. So, yeah, let's go with that. I don't care who's out there in that front 5. If those are guys that you brought in that feel like, hey, given a scenario, they're going to be able to step in for you for a series or a half or whatever. And those guys did that. So you need to call the plays accordingly. I'm sorry.
I disagree with Jarvis. I think the offensive line injuries were the reason why Arthur Smith had a quote unquote aggressive game plan and a pass happy game plan. And I think early in the game, it was effective. I certainly think, there was a big stretch of that game in the middle of the game in the second and third quarter where you leaned a lot on the passing game. I think there was like those 7 drives where the Falcons weren't successful moving the ball and came away with no points in those 2 quarters. They had like 29 plays and 20 of them were pass plays and 9 runs. But I didn't have a problem with that. So I feel like, I'll just say I think the offensive line injuries led to Arthur Smith's pass happy approach, and I'm good with it. I just don't think the Falcons did a great job executing those plays.
And I think that's a fair assessment too, because it's one thing, and I wasn't a fan of the 40. Like, that was a bit too much for me. Even if I think maybe if it would have hovered even around 32 or 35, I would have at least been able to say it's somewhere in the middle between, hey, Arthur, you're overthinking it, And hey, you got to go with, what you think you can get value out of based on who you have lining up on your O-line. But that said, it was still one of those things where at the end of the day, this probably shined the light on the fact that in any other situation, whether you have that guy at running back or not, the QB is really where it starts and stops in this league. And the Falcons just didn't get that what they needed, because I say that to say this. I think, and we'll talk about it in kind of our what's next, if you will, how the Falcons kind of get there. But I think it does speak volumes to say, hey, this offense did what it did or didn't do. Because that was another, piece of conversation that I heard this morning that I know I personally disagreed with, but it was, hey, the defense didn't get it done. Well, keep a defense on the field for like 11 minutes in the third quarter. They might just be tapped out by that final drive if it's coming down to one possession. But it was all of what they also had to do to keep that team above water in the first half. And eventually it does kind of weigh on you, and it kind of was reminiscent of some of those earlier losses. But again, we will talk about what that path going forward is for the Falcons, because there are still 4 games on the mantle for them to potentially still win out in this division. But first, we are going to talk about Prize Picks. So Prize Picks might actually do you just like one of our other sponsors and make you a little bit happier today on a day when maybe not so happy, because it's still the aftermath of a tough loss by the Falcons. But no fear. If you go to Prize Picks, which is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America, might just make your day. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And here's another cool thing. With the Prize Picks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and even college football top 25 matchups, you would have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second. It's okay, because that player can be rebooted. So Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Now, how do you get to take advantage of this? prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for your first deposit match up to $100. I'll tell you again, just in case you didn't hear, for the people in the back, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. It's highly encouraged that you would check this out, because it's daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, guys, as much as yesterday was tough, I like to call it the same thing that I actually give Desmond Ridder a compliment on from time to time, and I think he has selective amnesia. And I say that way because when he does have one of those foibles, whether it's a fumble or an interception or some type of foggy brain, usually he'll come back at some point in the game and redeem himself. That's what the Falcons have to do. The Falcons have a redemption tour to go on for these next 4 games in order for them to win this division. They can still do it. And Tori, how do they get it done? First off, how do they get it done in Carolina next week so that they can beat the Panthers, but also to reposition themselves to potentially win this division by how they go down the stretch in this final quarter?
Yeah, I know before we started recording this, I said I wasn't going to talk a lot about injuries, but here I am. I'm going to talk a little bit about injuries, but I think getting healthy is going to be really, really important down the stretch for these next 4 games. Getting guys like Jake Matthews back, Drew Dalman, Kaleb McGary, Nate Landman, David Onyemata, Jeff Okudah. Like, I'm just going on and on. But this was, I remember I said this on our last show, but this was going to be the first game that the Falcons' depth was really, really tested. And for the most part, I actually thought that depth held up. I thought Clark Phillips played a really dang good game. And I actually want to see more of him in the last 4 games of this season. So I think that there are reasons to be pleased with how depth performed, but you don't want to put that on your depth. I mean, and at one point, I think the Falcons only had like 2 offensive linemen left that they could pull up. So, and one of them was a rookie that yesterday, I think, was his first day active. So that of the entire year. So getting guys healthy. I know you're at the point of the season where it's a slug and it's tough and injuries are going to happen. It's the NFL, but get guys as healthy as they can be for these next 4 games because they're going to dictate if you even have a postseason.
Indeed. And it's interesting you said that because as I was looking, down the depth chart, Tori, I was thinking to myself, and I'll actually save this for the end, but I was like, yeah, if you get into a situation where some of these players aren't able to go, whether it's this next game or the next couple games, where do you go from there? But I'll save that thought to wrap us up. Jarvis, what do you think you need to see, or what do we need to see out of the Falcons in Carolina next week, but also to tee that team up to get to run, quote unquote, the gauntlet and win this division at the end of the season?
Win. They just have to win. I hate to simplify it like that, but they just have to go out there and get a win because they're just awful. They're just awful. It's just so many things going on. I always talked about, I brought this up on the NFL Kickoff Live show that we do, T, and about bad organizations. Like you hear about the off the field stuff more so than the on the field stuff. And that's what the case with the Panthers. Like they have so much crap going on off the field. It's just like, this should be a game. This is a winnable game. And I don't even know what, like this is a better win game. Like this is a better win game.
Yeah, you gotta win.
You better go up there and win because there are no conversations about, oh yeah, well, we still got a chance. Mathematically, we still no, none of that. Go up there and win the game and just see how everything else plays out.
And Aaron, how about for you? The trip up to Carolina, what does that need to look like? Obviously a win, but also as it relates to teeing this team up for the rest of the season and getting in position to win the division.
Yeah, I think they need an adrenaline shot. I think they need to go out to Charlotte and handle their business and basically beat the brakes off the Panthers so that they can get, I guess, inspired to go on the run for those final 3 games that should be much tougher than this Panthers game and sort of wipe the bitter taste out of their mouth from this sort of disappointing loss against the Bucs and, just get that confidence back of being like, okay, we are actually a good team. We just didn't show it on Sunday and trick the rest of us into, buying back into the Falcons down the stretch. So that's what I think they need to do.
Yeah, for the first time this season, they need a decisive win from start to finish, no doubt.
Yes.
Decisive.
Multi-score, not just
multi-score. Yeah.
Multi-score.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
10 points.
Leave no doubt.
Leave no doubt.
Exactly.
Yes.
And starters, you have one job. That is for you to perform above yourself. I want you to start excelling. Like we said, we want to see exceeding expectations, and we want to see it for 4 games, not just one or not just even a stretch of a game. And for those who are right behind them, because we don't know what this injury report is going to look like, or as I like to call it, the infirmary report for the Falcons for the rest of the season, you don't need to just be ready when your numbers call. You need to be ready to play one step above when your number is called, because that's what it's going to take for everybody to do their job and then some for this team to be able to make it to the postseason. So we will see, guys. We appreciate you, as always, for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, the party continues tomorrow, where we'll talk dogs on the Atlanta Football Party once again. We'll see you then.